Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 4 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and with me here today is my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello.
Yes, he might sound a little bit different to you than last time. I have moved out to LA to pursue a new job opportunity I received just a week ago, and so we're going to be doing most of these podcasts probably from long distance from now on. I have my dad recording on Skype on my computer, and we're going to test how this goes, work out the bugs as we go along, but I think this method should work for us.
Outstanding. I'm excited. And good job, Alex. You're out of the house.
Oh, you wanted me out. I see how it is.
No, I miss you already.
All right. Well, for those who haven't listened to our podcast before, this is College Football Throwdown. We are a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. Father-son duo tackling this wonderful sport that we love. And we're going to divide our discussions into national topics, Big Ten topics, and then team-specific topics. For us, this would be Nebraska, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, which is, of course, my dad and I's favorite team. And we're going to start our discussion today with some discussion about the media days that have been going on. Several of the conferences has been doing these over the past 2 weeks, and there have been some interesting news that have popped out from them.
Right. Outstanding. Yes, so far, as of this evening anyway, we're looking at already we've seen the SEC media days, the Big 12 media days, and ACC media days have transpired as well, I believe. So now it's on to the Big Ten here later this week. But it's been kind of uneventful, frankly, as far as what's taken place. There's not been any real big bombshell type information that has come out of the media days. Somewhat predictably, who's supposed to be or expected to be, the media favorites has pretty much come to pass, although there was a couple of interesting things out of the SEC, one of them being that Alabama received more first place votes than Auburn for winning their division. But let me see, I may be getting that wrong. I think Auburn was picked to win the division, but Alabama had more overall votes to win the conference or something like that. So there was kind of this interesting twist, because when you let folks vote, and they get the opportunity to kind of pick first and second, then depending on how many people end up with the second on the ballot can kind of change up those rankings. And so they did have that odd little quirk with their conference media poll.
That's interesting. Is Auburn expected to kind of bounce back this year?
They are expected to be very good this year. Yes, I mean they had a good year with their young coach, and now they have a new defensive coordinator. Actually, the recently relieved coach from Florida, who was an outstanding defensive coordinator in a number of stops in his past, Will Muschamp, has moved over to Auburn and is now their coordinator, their defensive coordinator.
Ah, that's cool. And wasn't there also the commissioner of the Big 12 at the media days talked about the expansion issue and basically said that they are perfectly content at where they are?
Yes, they did say that, and that seems to be the continued representation from the Big 12 commissioner's office. But you can't ignore some of the conversations and the testing of the waters that seems to be going on at some of the institutions, who are clearly expressing their interest or at least concern over the long-term viability of the structure that they have, and the long-term expectations, and that's coming from conference school presidents, like Oklahoma and West Virginia. So the bottom line is that I don't know that everybody's on the same page, and I don't believe that his comments, although it sounded like, everybody was singing Kumbaya, that it's all perfect in Big 12 land.
I do think the commissioner is right in that they shouldn't make this important decision after just 1 year of the college football playoff.
Oh,
You know,
me too, Alex. In fact, what people need to remember is that if there had just been one change, if Michigan State had beaten Ohio State, or even had the Michigan State Ohio State game been, a slobber knocker kind of ugly, you know, team or game rather, that in all likelihood that might very well have led to two Big 12 teams getting into the playoff potentially. So they were very close to definitely getting one in, and because of the way that they did that co-champions thing, they might have even been able to find a way to slip two people or two teams in. So I completely agree with the Big 12 commissioner's feeling that he needs to wait and see. But I have a feeling that they received a pretty clear message from the committee that they would like to see them get a conference championship game.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. It seems like that is an important factor amongst the different like sets of criteria that they have to consider.
Right. And in general, with the conference media days, I'll tell you, it's interesting how these things have evolved because they used to be very obscure events, but they have evolved into being a much bigger deal than what they used to be, and to the point where it's almost a joke how much of a circus it has become in the SEC. And there is some question as to whether or not some of the other conferences who are trying to kind of keep up with the SEC's level of interest, are they trying too hard, with all of this stuff? Because there's a balance between are you just hyping things, or is it really an opportunity for the media to do their jobs and get the kind of inside stories that they need, not just for the next story of tomorrow, but they should be accumulating data that they can use, frankly, throughout the season.
Yeah, well, it certainly you can definitely see a discrepancy there when you consider that the SEC media days are a full week long, whereas most others are a few days at most.
Right, right. But I think that the information that's kind of drawn out of them, especially in this newer day and age of all the internet media and various websites, that the information that's being shared there is not the shocking information that maybe was a part of the past. For the most part, all these media types are following it with such close scrutiny that they pretty much know everything going into the media days, and now they're trying to find those small little kernels of things. And we'll maybe talk about that a little bit more as it relates to Nebraska. I think it becomes interesting when your team has a new coach or other really dramatic change of circumstance. Maybe a quarterback that's new and something big like that tends to be important to the media.
Right. And I want to change the discussion to a different topic here, but
Okay.
before we do that, I thought you might crack your beer that you have
Yes,
there.
I need to do that. Yep, yep. You don't have one on your end, huh?
Not with me at the moment, no.
Okay. Well, we need to get on that. You got to find the grocery stores there in LA. Here we
I
go.
already have, actually. But the next thing we wanted to talk about was Steve Spurrier and his little press conference that he had a couple days ago that kind of surprised some people with. I mean, I guess it wasn't like surprising because it was like a very Steve Spurrier thing to do, but it just sort of came up out of nowhere, didn't it?
Well, it was. The timing was very odd because he had just been done with the media days, and so he had the attention of everyone to kind of say whatever he needed to say, and he could have done it then. But I think it was one of those things that really struck him maybe after he had left the media event, and it kind of started eating at his craw and bugging him a little bit. And then he started to read some of the immediate reactions from some of the media folks and the stories that were being written, and he just decided that he needed to step up and kind of clear the air about a few things.
Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting kind of reflection on Because when I was listening to the discussion on Sirius XM radio, they were talking about how coaches always tell the players like not to read online message boards, to try to keep everything inside, insular, to not let that affect you. But clearly, Spurrier is reading more of those articles than he might care to admit.
Yes, that's always true, and I would say that that's true of a lot of coaches.
Uh huh. Yeah.
And especially Spurrier because he's so media savvy. I think he always likes it's almost a playful relationship that he has with the media, and so I think he was a little frustrated that the focus so quickly became what's wrong with South Carolina. You had one bad year, and all of a sudden everybody's kind of speculating about your future and how much longer are you going to coach and that sort of stuff, which is totally legitimate because Steve Spurrier's like, I think 74, 75 years old. I don't know. I mean, he's up there in age. And so it's like, when are you going to retire type of thing.
Right. But at the
75
same
I don't remember how old he is.
Right. At the same time, though, I remember during his whole spiel, he kind of did this little self promotion thing where he's talking about like all his records, and all the things he's done for the program, and they just had like an 11-win year like 2 years ago, didn't they?
Yes, and that's where the media's reaction to his little press conference was like, "Hey, Steve, we know all that. You don't have to, take us down memory lane. We're aware of what you have accomplished, in your career." And they just found that to be a bit odd and self-aggrandizing rather than getting to the real point, which was about this year's team. And he didn't talk about his team this year. He spent an awful lot of that conference, a press conference, talking about himself and his past accomplishments, and that seemed a little weird.
I don't know. From what I do remember, I mean, they definitely did talk about like the current team somewhat in his speech. Like, we've got a good team this year. We're focused on that. Blah blah blah. Just kind of typical talk. And then maybe this is different from the reaction of the general media. But like I said, I was just listening to Sirius XM in the car. I was stuck in traffic here in LA, and they were actually one of their commentators was kind of like, I kind of like that he was like, what's the word do you want to use?
Feisty or combative.
Well, yeah, well, that he had that energy, but also that he was being a little like self-promoting, like not backing down from all the good that he's done for the university.
Right.
Like well, just trying to say that the media was overreacting to,
one bad season.
Basically. Right. One bad season, and I think what Spurrier was kind of trying to argue, and this might be a little of a tougher thing to sell, is that there were plenty of other 7-win teams that were very happy with 7 wins. 7 wins in a terrible season, but the idea being that the expectation for South Carolina was a lot higher than that last year.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's because of him. So it's just kind of a microcosm, I guess, of what those coaches go through and the kind of constant media scrutiny that they're under. And it's what have you done for me lately? And if you wonder why, these coaches tend to be quite insulary in their choices and how they go about managing their program, it's because of this type of media reaction that they do that. I mean, that's a learned behavior because they don't want to have to deal with it. And he clearly wants to get rid of that, whatever that issue is, and get beyond it before he has the beginning of his fall camp.
All right, and now we're going to transition into our discussion on the Big Ten. I thought we would talk a little bit about the Big Ten Media Days since those are coming up here this week.
Right. Now, so those are this Thursday and Friday, and it's going to be interesting because they have a new format this year. They're dividing the teams up half and half, pretty much half on Thursday, half on Friday. They've historically done all the teams on the first day and then had roundtable type activities on the second day in past years. But now that they're at 14 teams, they've recognized that they just can't get them all in, and along with all the other things that they try to do. They're still going to have the student speaker and the luncheon and stuff, which has become a very popular thing that's part of the media days. And so that's still going to happen. But it's just interesting to see. I'll be curious to find out how much new stuff actually comes out of these media days because with all the scrutiny and the day-to-day visibility that all these programs have, other than the coaches maybe making some individual roster announcement or something like that that's been hidden under the wraps, I just wonder how many new things are going to be said. It almost becomes a question of who performs well, which coaches and players do the best job of commanding the room and are dynamic in that environment.
True, although this translates nicely into our roster update discussion we want to have about the Big Ten, because with the whole Braxton Miller situation at Ohio State, I guarantee you that there are going to be reporters swarming all around Jim Tressel at the media days asking him about that.
That would not be Jim Tressel. That would
Oh,
be Urban
I mean,
Meyer.
Urban Meyer. Darn it.
I love it. You're acting like me, man. I'm the old man that's supposed to do that.
Oh, God. I'm stuck in the past.
Yes, you are. But no, you're exactly right, and it's interesting. I don't know if that was by design that they did that announcement when they did, but I wouldn't put it past Urban Meyer, because he's such a detailed guy, that he didn't actually contemplate when would be the best time for us to release this information, knowing that he's probably had a series of discussions with Braxton about how we could best deal with this three quarterback situation. And I think he's been probably in Braxton's ear a little bit, talking with him about, Braxton, here's your future. And going into the NFL, your best chance to have that advanced football career is likely to be in some kind of an H-back wide receiver type of role, where we use your athleticism and maybe occasionally let you play quarterback, as part of a package, but you're not going to be a every down quarterback. We've got enough data already on him in the years that he did play regularly to suggest that he had a long way to go before he was going to be the consistent, accurate thrower that would be required of an NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and isn't it also part of this whole situation that Braxton just hasn't recovered from his injury? Like, his arm isn't quite what it's supposed to be.
Right, and I think there's probably some truth to that. I don't know how much of that was, really formally publicized or whatever, but certainly there's some speculation about that, and so it just makes a lot of sense. And I think releasing this information a week or so before these media days actually makes a lot of sense if you're Ohio State and your objective is to maximize the amount of time that Ohio State stays front and center in the news, because he was able to garner some significant headlines and conversation in the days leading up to the Big Ten media days, and then it's going to be a consuming subject for that one-day event when Ohio State's there, the day that they're there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty genius from a marketing standpoint, frankly.
Yeah, well, and just in terms of what that does for Ohio State, I think it's actually very much a good thing, because now that limits the quarterback battle to just the two quarterbacks, which it will still be a close race as it is, and it gives them an extra offensive weapon if Braxton can, use his athleticism as a good H-back.
Right. Oh man, I agree. I mean, if we get this to talking about on the field, I think Urban has managed this just perfectly, especially if Braxton is fully on board with this, because I think it could make defending Ohio State even that much more difficult. I mean, the risks that you will have to respect because of what Braxton can do, both as an athlete and, frankly, as a thrower. You need to respect the possibility that when they do one of those fly sweeps, or they bring him in motion, or they put him in some kind of a slot position behind the tight end or something like that in the slot, man, you're going to have to worry about all the things that guy might be able to do, whether it's just a quick drop back and get a quick double pass type of thing, or whether it's a sweeping action and then he throws the ball off the sweep, or he just runs it because he's such a great runner.
Right.
You got to defend both of those as a defense. It's brutal.
Yeah, it's smart.
Yep.
What are the other roster updates you want to talk about in terms of the Big Ten?
Well, it's interesting. I know that a lot of the teams probably have roster updates, different players that are coming and going, and I don't really have that laundry list of ones. Certainly, the Braxton Miller one is the one that has gotten a lot of national attention and Big Ten attention. I would suggest that there's probably one other one that also has gotten some significant attention, and that's within the Big Ten West, probably one of the better recruits from last year's recruiting class for Wisconsin, did not gain entry into the school. Now, this may require a little bit of an explanation in that it is it is a circumstance where the young man has qualified according to NCAA standards, but did not qualify according to the University of Wisconsin's entrance exam standards or entrance requirements. And what that really means is that Wisconsin, some schools, including a lot of prominent schools, that are very highly regarded academically, um, make or provide a certain number of exceptions for student athletes,
Hmm.
so as to help those schools, compete for those premier athletes who maybe have come from an area or a school system that didn't prepare them as well as others might have. And so they kind of cut them a break a little bit. They still have to meet some kind of basic standard, but it might be a little easier to get in than, say, the Joe Blow student that's just trying to get into the school. Well, my sense is that Wisconsin's willingness to accommodate that is less than average, and they're already one of the premier academic institutions in the country. I'll throw a barb in that is my alma mater. So they weren't willing to concede that, I guess, in the case of this Jordan Stevenson, who is a four-star running back, one of the top 25 or 30 running backs in the country, depending on who you talk to. Certainly a guy that, when you watch his film, he reminds me of a young Amir Abdullah in terms of his physical size. Not as good, not as dynamic of a shifty runner, but very compact, very powerful, good balance, and seems to have pretty darn good speed. Probably faster if I were to look at his video. It's a little hard to tell sometimes with the kind of competition that they're playing against, but he was playing in Texas, and so usually there's some good athletes going in that direction down there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. So he's an interest for us because there's a potential Nebraska element here where Jordan has expressed some interest in Nebraska as a new landing spot now that Wisconsin's not an option for him.
Yeah, this would make for a big find for Nebraska, for our recruiting, and a bonus that I think would help the fans' confidence in Riley, certainly.
Right. Well, and it's just interesting that those kind of circumstances don't happen very often, and it points to really the issue that we probably want to address at some point. It doesn't have to be on today's podcast, but it's just one of those things for us to put on our list. Is this whole process with the clearinghouse and the decisions being made by these institutions? It just seems unfair, frankly, that a student athlete waits all the way until this moment in time for them to get their judgment, so to speak, of whether or not they are going to get in. Now, I will concede that in all likelihood, I don't know any of the details of Jordan's situation, but in all likelihood, he was probably taking a class this summer, to make himself eligible,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe he needed to get a certain grade on that, not just a passing grade, but a certain grade on that to get the kind of GPA that would have allowed him into Wisconsin. He was already, had made the grade for the NCAA's minimum standards to be able to be eligible, but not Wisconsin standards. So the question is about the timing. The question is, what can we do to make sure these kids don't get stuck in a situation like he's in, where he literally has about three choices. Either he can choose from one of the schools that is willing to extend him an offer right now and has an available scholarship to give him right now. He could go the route of junior college and he'd be immediately eligible at a junior college, or he could simply wait it out, go through the full recruiting process again, maybe take a couple of classes at a community college there in his hometown or region, and then come somewhere in December and be a December grad. I mean, be like a December high school grad, and sign and come in for the next spring. And so, but regardless, it kind of messes with that kid's life.
Yeah, I can say as somebody who went through the college process not so long ago, that would definitely suck to get this far into the summer to have to totally rethink your plans in terms of college. I do.
Right. I mean, he's
That's
got 2 weeks.
Yeah, that would be rough. Um, and finally, let's move on to the Nebraska topics we wanted to talk about today. You said that there was a roster update on Nebraska's side that was interesting as well, right?
Yes, well, there is a number of players that have been announced over these last couple of weeks, with guys leaving the program, no longer with the team. A couple of wide receivers, Kevin Gladney, and probably the biggest one is earlier in the summer was David Santos, who has been a starter for us in the past and seen a lot of snaps at a position of great need. I mean, we just don't have very many linebackers on our roster, and here we go losing a guy like that, and that's really going to affect our depth going into the season. And so again, Nebraska finds themselves below the 85 scholarship limit uh, by a number of scholarships prior to the season beginning. Now, I will concede that I think already the new coaching staff recognizes the mistake of that recent history that was going on with Bo Pelini and his staff, where we would regularly start the season sometimes 6, 8 players short of a full scholarship roster, and then we would be giving away not the 1, 2, or even 3 scholarships to deserving walk-ons, but we would end up finding ourselves with like 8. And when you're doing that, you're not putting the best foot forward in terms of trying to maximize the talent on your roster. That's just poor roster management on the part of what our previous coaching staff was doing. And so I think I've already seen improvement from this current coaching staff. But again, there's so much you can't predict about what's going to happen with young people, over the course of the summer. Probably the biggest news that's starting to percolate right now is, there's no one's really heard from Riker Fife, who was last year's backup quarterback for us, and he apparently is not with the team this summer. And there is a great deal of speculation, although I don't know that it's anything official yet, that he is not likely to be with the team come the fall. And that, to me, is really significant, because he was really the only quarterback who saw any legitimate action other than Tommy Armstrong, last season.
Yeah, well, that is a little worrying if that's true, because that means we've lost Fife and Johnny Stanton within the course of a couple months.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is that Riker was a guy who was a walk-on, got put on scholarship somewhat because he had risen to that level of contributor, and but then after after spring practice, found himself probably sitting at best third and probably fourth on the depth chart, behind the surging AJ Bush and the young Darlington kid, and all of a sudden, um, you know, he was looking at, number one, not being able to maintain that scholarship, and looking up at these younger guys.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, it's a situation you see repeat itself over and over again. It's just the reality.
It is a reality, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. This could be a little bit of a teaser for a future episode where we talk a little bit about roster management and oversigning, and how far do you go with that to make sure that as a team you don't find yourself in that situation. Because there's certainly some techniques that are being used by other schools that frankly is one of the reasons why our tradition of the walk-on program is not as big of an advantage for us as it maybe once was. There's a variety of reasons maybe why that's true, but certainly one of them is included in this whole idea of roster management.
And then the last topic you have written down here on our little schedule is reality check, and I'm a little curious what you meant by that for
Well,
Nebraska.
I just touched on it a little bit when you start hearing, the departures that were not necessarily anticipated back when, um, what do I want to say, back after spring practice. We didn't know that David Santos wasn't going to be there, and that Kevin Gladney and some of the wide receivers were going to be gone. Uh, you know, when when you begin to look at all of those things, and you look at some of the positions that we think we're even going to be good at, I feel like Nebraska fans uh, are are being a little bit too optimistic, frankly. And so my message to my fellow Husker fans is to take a step back and let's look at the reality of the situation. There's certainly a scenario, and it seems to be what is a prevailing view right now, that people are so excited with this new coaching staff because of the professionalism that they've shown and just how well they've managed social media and some of those kinds of techniques, that these are clearly people who know what they're doing, and that's true. I mean, I think that's a good observation, and I'm excited about it as well. But as I look at this roster, the ridiculously thin status of our linebackers is a huge concern. The lack of clear maturity and performance at the quarterback position, which is so central to whether a team's going to be effective or not in college football, is a big concern. We have a number of new offensive linemen that we're optimistic about, but haven't necessarily played a ton of starting type snaps. And so you begin to break down our team into those individual groups, and there's an awful lot of optimism. For example, everybody seems to be very high on what Demorne Pearsonell is going to do, and they're very, very high on Malik Collins, our defensive tackle, and to a slightly lesser extent Vincent Valentine. And although all three of those players, I believe, are going to be very good, solid players, I think that their expectations, or I should say, the Nebraska fans and media's expectations of what those players are going to do is too high. And so my reality check is everybody's all geeked about Malik Collins being this superstar, and I'm here to tell you, after rewatching a lot of the films from last year, I see glimpses of him having individual periods of play where he played at a very high level, but I also see a considerable number of plays in which he did not use good technique when it was clear that either his conditioning or his technique simply was not consistent enough to be a down every down type of player, difference maker. He certainly had his flashes, and I believe he's going to be a great player. But I worry that we're putting a little too much expectation on him. Similarly, with Demorne Pearsonell, he's done some great things. Great punt returner, clearly has some good vision, but when he starts becoming the focus of defense's attention because there's no longer a Kenny Bell who's stretching the defense that they have to respect, unless we get somebody to emerge in that Kenny Bell role, I think Demorne Pearsonell is going to get swallowed up. He's a tiny guy. He's a guy that can easily get physical and muscled around during the course of a game. I just think that it's going to be very, very difficult for him to match the kind of open field success that he had this year because he doesn't have a Kenny Bell on the other side. There, I said a lot. Go from there, pal.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because oftentimes you and I are here, trying to tell Nebraska fans like that the sky isn't falling, with like some of the decisions Riley makes and stuff, that we're being too like pessimistic and like the, what have you done for me lately kind of thing. But here we're being a little bit of the opposite, more of the, calm down guys. Maybe we're not quite as good as you all are hyping us up to be.
Well, right, and bottom line is if we have an unusually healthy year in which we have very few injuries at key spots like linebacker and defensive tackle, and within certain areas of the offensive line, then we're going to be fine and maybe have a great year. But when you look at the combination of one of the more challenging non-conference schedules that we've had in recent years, combined with, all the question marks that the team has, and then you add on that we have a whole new coaching staff and an offensive philosophy that frankly remains for the most part under wraps, because what we saw in the spring game was very vanilla and generic. We know kind of what they've said, but we don't know for sure what that's going to be. All those question marks. I think Nebraska fans, they're very quick to point to Melvin Gordon's departure from Wisconsin and them having a new coaching staff as reasons why Wisconsin should take a step back. But then we don't assign ourselves that same, cautionary step back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, because like we talked about on last podcast, when Bo came in, he got us to a 9-win year. His first year. So that's like the expectation.
Right. Well, and part of that has been, the the games or the schedules that have been on the docket, so to speak, during those years have really been on the easier side of things, frankly. And this year is the last year of that period, frankly. And so it is important that we come out of the gates good this year with the Mike Riley era, because if you look at future schedules, they don't get easier; they get a lot tougher. And so this is the year to make hay with a good record that helps lead us to hopefully a top 25, maybe even a top 20 finish in recruiting, which will be tough, but I'm still hopeful, because we're going to need that kind of infusion of talent to kind of hang with the big boys in these next few years, because right around the corner we're going to have some non-conference schedules combined with conference schedules that are way tougher than what we've been seeing.
Mm-hmm. All right, stuff to be looking into as Husker fans, it seems like.
That's right. I'd be curious to hear what anybody out there who might be listening to our podcast would have to say about that. Do they think I'm being overly pessimistic, and maybe they have a way to respond to that, or maybe they agree with my tepid view of some of these individual players who are being hyped. Maybe they share my view and can add some additional insight.
All right. Well, if you people out there want to send us those sorts of emails, you can leave a comment on footballthrowdown.podomatic.com, which is where we put up the episodes, or leave a comment on our iTunes page. We also have an email at huskerpete13@gmail.com. We'd always like to hear from you guys. Any comments, constructive criticism, always appreciated. So I want to thank you for co-hosting this podcast with me, Dad. I think we got into some good discussion about what's been going on in the sport recently.
Absolutely. Let's do it again soon.
That's right. All right. And we'll see you later, college football fans.